right, good morning, everyone. It's so great to be with everyone this morning. I'm Katie Dykes, the Commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And today, I'm so pleased to be joined here by Governor Lamont and many of my fellow agency commissioners, our advocates, and state legislators to announce a very important piece of legislation that Governor Lamont will be introducing this session to strengthen Connecticut's resilience against extreme weather events. As folks are familiar, last year Governor Lamont championed Senate Bill 11, a governor's bill that included components that are very similar to what's in this legislation, but we are also augmenting that legislation in key areas, which I know you'll hear about from speakers this morning. Just to refresh, of course, extreme weather is costing the state hundreds of millions of dollars every year. In addition to the tragic loss of life, last year's unprecedented flooding event in the Naugatuck Valley caused more than $200 million in damage to the transportation and other infrastructure, and catastrophically damaged more than 2,300 homes and businesses. Just a few months earlier, in January 2024, repeated heavy rainstorms resulted in a near failure of the Fitchville Pond Dam in Bozrah. Parts of Norwich experienced flooding from the Yantic River, and 500 people had to evacuate that area. July 2023 to June 2024 was the wettest 12-month period on record for the state of Connecticut. Additionally, 2024 was the hottest year and the hottest summer on record for Hartford. During last fall's severe drought, Connecticut got a glimpse of new hazards that are on the horizon when over 200 wildfires, including a 100-plus acre fire in Berlin and Meriden, burned well outside the state's typical fire season. Governor Lamont has long championed efforts to address resilience because we know how important this is to the residents and businesses of our state to make sure that we can try to stay safe and prosperous in the face of an accelerating climate change and extreme weather events. And I'm so grateful to the leadership, Governor, that you're taking here with this bill that we're announcing today. Over the past several years, state agencies such as Connecticut DEEP have engaged in innovative and results-based efforts to increase resiliency and development for our residents and businesses. I just want to highlight that, Governor, when you took office, you charged us with expanding the focus of the Governor's Council on Climate Change to include resilience. And many of the concepts that are in this legislation that you're introducing result from the dialogue and discussions we had across state agencies and with advocates and business leaders to talk about the types of programs and investments that we need in order to help keep our communities safe from extreme weather. One of those efforts that was recommended by the Governor's Council on Climate Change included launching the Deep Climate Resilience Fund. And I'm grateful that the legislature has supported expanded bond authorizations for that program. We've heard from municipal leaders who are on the front lines of addressing these extreme weather events that they need more support to help invest in infrastructure. And so today, in addition to celebrating this legislation that the governor is introducing, DEEP is also launching our first RFP of the year to provide matching funds for communities that want to pursue FEMA BRIC applications. The FEMA has $750 million they're making available competitively for infrastructure projects to address climate resilience, and so we're hoping to, with these dollars, to help support municipalities in covering a portion of the 25% local match that's required by FEMA, so that we can bring more federal dollars to bear in the types of infrastructure projects we need. I also want to note that we've made extraordinary investments in climate resilience already to date, and we are eager to continue that progress. Some of those key resilience efforts include the Meriden Green, a 14-acre park designed to absorb stormwater and draw it away from downtown buildings, unlocking new properties for affordable housing. a stormwater authority in New London that is a template for other municipalities across the state to follow, thanks to legislation Governor Lamont introduced in 2021 to make stormwater authorities a possibility for all municipalities. Rain garden investments to address flooding in Hamden, a new electrical generation station for Bridgeport Harbor, a flood protection project for the Congress Street substation, stormwater upgrades at the Raymark Superfund site in Stratford, and other remediation work helping homeowners and businesses. We've invested in upgrades to dozens of wastewater treatment plants across the state, as well as significant investment in solutions to address extreme weather and flooding-induced sewer overflows in the north end of Hartford. This is an important part of the Lamont administration's approach to addressing extreme weather events, is this constant work we've been doing to support these investments across the state. As Connecticut experiences mounting costs from severe weather events, securing this federal funding for proactive resilience planning and investment is so important, and that's why we're excited to share later today on our website this RFP for the Deep Climate Resilience Fund. In addition, the measures that you're going to be hearing about today in this Senate bill in this governor's bill are critical to help address, ensure that we are planning more carefully and prudently to help reduce and minimize the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events on our communities. And they harness, I think that the overall approach is to help to work with industry and incent industry and our insurance industry and municipalities as well to support investments and help improve affordability of options to better protect people and ensure against climate risks. And with that, I would love to introduce Commissioner Andy Mays, who's been a real leader here in Connecticut and across the country on these approaches. Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Dykes. Thank you, Governor Lamont. As I think we all already know, Connecticut's leadership, Governor Lamont's leadership on the issue of extreme weather nationally has been outstanding. But what you may not know, for those of us like Commissioner Dykes, the other members of the administration, and myself, is that the governor is still not satisfied, and I'm so happy for that. He keeps pushing to make things better. Now, for those of us who came in, I parked on the street, I walked in freezing cold, the concern was ice, so it may not seem like this is the time to talk about flooding and water events and not some of the other extreme weather events. But it is, because we need to plan, we need to prepare. This is precisely when we need to do it, because when a flood comes, it is too late to get flood insurance. Commissioner Dykes mentioned some of the issues we had in Connecticut over the past year. We've looked across the country. You take a look at the wildfires in California, you look at the hurricanes in Georgia, you look at the increasing number of tornadoes and severe convective storms. And you know this is an issue of increasing risk. And here in Connecticut, we are moving to address that to protect both our individuals, businesses, and communities. That is what we do best, and that is what this bill will do. Going back to what happened in Norwich, and before that, I've been through, as an insurance person, been through a number of these flooding events. And one of the unfortunate things you hear is that people simply were not aware that flood insurance was a good thing. The way it happens with most people, and I say this based on a long experience on this, is that if you are living in a floodplain and you have a mortgage that's going to be securitized, sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which most are, then you are required to get flood insurance. If you don't have a mortgage, if you don't live in a designated floodplain, you are not required. And for too many of us, saying it's not required means that we shouldn't get it. I'm going to give you an example. I live in Wilton, my hometown, and there is a central community organization, a nonprofit, that has, it's a real credit to the community. And last year during these storms, I found out by speaking to the executive director that what had happened is that in the last flood map, a significant part of their property had been moved out of the flood zone. So they canceled their flood insurance on that. And they've ended up with more than $4 million in damages. The message is, if it rains, it can flood. We need to ensure that everyone, that individuals and businesses can protect themselves. According to FEMA, 25% of flood losses occur outside of designated flood zones. And I tell you this, not just as insurance commissioner, but as a consumer. I live in one of those areas where the maps tell you it's very unlikely that you will have a flood in the next 50 years. But I still have flood insurance, just to protect myself. That's part of what protection is about. That's part of what we need to convey to our consumers, and that is part of what this wonderful bill will do. You know, flood insurance is a federal program. As we know, the National Flood Insurance Program, which is where most people will get their flood insurance. What we do need here in Connecticut, at the level of the state government, to provide information to consumers so that they are able to manage their flood risk. They are properly informed, they know what is available to them, and they know what they can do to mitigate the risk. And I say mitigate the risk because there are two things you can do. One is, of course, construction standards, the way you actually either build or retrofit a house. But this bill will require banks, mortgage companies, insurance companies, and insurance brokers and agents to notify all consumers, everybody, about the availability of flood insurance when taking out a mortgage. And it's going to require the consumer to formally notify, formally acknowledge if they are going to decline this policy, because we do not want to hear people saying, we didn't know we needed this. We want to make sure that government works as it is intended to provide the information to its citizens to protect its citizens. And as I mentioned, there is a second part of this, which is resiliency. You've heard that an awful lot, and there is a reason for that. Certainly as insurance commissioners, we've had a significant focus on resiliency. The investment that you make in resiliency will get you a significant return. Every dollar invested gets you somewhere between $4 and $13 in return based on what you do. We need that, and late last year, I'm pleased to notify you, the insurance department did create a multidisciplinary advisory council, which within the next couple of months will be coming out with recommendations for us. And this council is composed of industry, consumer representatives, academics, and others. We want to make sure that all our citizens are heard. We want to make sure that we understand what has been happening and will continue to happen. And we want to know everything we can do to help you, the consumer, address the issue. We know, certainly for most of us, our house is our single biggest investment. We know our businesses are the ones that keep people employed. We need to make sure they're protected. You know, we heard, and I think the December meeting is probably still in the archives on CTN. We've heard about best practices that are working for natural disasters in various communities, you know, public funding for financial resources, and I see we have the Green Bank here, and certainly we have Commissioner Dykes and all the work she's done. Technical assistance to fortify roofs, strengthening building codes, retrofitting buildings to increase or to reduce recovery costs. As I said, for every dollar spent, you get the kind of return you would never be able to get from the stock market. It is a wise investment. It protects individuals. it protects families, it protects communities, it protects our state. And the governor understands this. The governor understands. He's been a leader in understanding and driving the need for mitigation and education. And that is what this bill is about. We want to make sure that every single resident of Connecticut understands the risks and understands how to address them. And if I can just throw in a commercial here, as we go forward, if any consumer has any question about their insurance, not just a problem. If you have a problem, come to us. But as you're getting started, if you've got a question, come to us. We've got a Consumer Affairs Division that is more than happy to help you, that will tell you based on where you are, what you can expect, what the concerns are, and that will help guide you to the kind of coverage you need to be properly protected. ct.gov/CID. It's on the website. It's easy to reach, and we love to hear from you. So with that, thank you for your time, and I will yield.
Terrific. Next, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Caffarelli from the Department of Consumer Protection.
Thank you. I'm Brian Caffarelli, the Commissioner of Consumer Protection, and I want to thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this important issue. We are always committed to working closely with our sister agencies. As you've heard the Commissioner, the Insurance Commissioner and Commissioner Dykes talk about this issue, I could dovetail on some of the comments that were made in terms of education and information, and that's really the role that we're going to help play, working in concert with our fellow agencies. In terms of when you are purchasing or renting a property, you should know the risks of flood and the vulnerabilities, and that's where we're going to help out. At Consumer Protection, we always try and help educate and inform consumers so that they can make that choice and take those steps that were outlined so well by the Insurance Commissioner. I do want to give a shout out to you as well and your complaints department, because we have a robust complaints department and we refer a lot of things back and forth, and I just hear wonderful things. So again, if you do have challenges or issues, we are here to help, both at Consumer Protection and the Insurance Department. So I just want to again thank you very much for your leadership on this. We're committed to working with the agencies to make sure that consumers are informed so that they can make the right decisions.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I'll just share a few elements of this legislative proposal that are central to DEEP's work. Under the state's Coastal Zone Management Act, our agency provides technical consultation for municipalities when they're considering zoning changes in coastal areas that would be prone to sea level rise and flooding. And so some new provisions in this legislation would expand the types of municipal zoning actions that would require a referral or a consultation with DEEP, that including activities in flood risk areas or near coastal elements like wetlands, beaches, and dunes that help buffer flooding, as well as actions involving authorizations for new single-family home construction in these extremely flood-prone areas. The purpose of this expansion of this consultation requirement is to ensure that DEEP's coastal permitting program and staff resources are available to inform municipal zoning commissions about some of the potential impacts and risks associated with these decisions, as well as any possible mitigation concepts that could help to address that. It also, this legislation would also include a prohibition on new state funding investment in residential development, again, just limited to those highest risk flood zones. So we're excited about moving this forward. I do want to introduce, of course, some of our legislative partners and particularly our municipal leaders. George Temple, as the first selectman in Oxford, has truly been on the front lines of extreme weather events and helping to keep communities safe. First selectman.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everyone. The 6 most dangerous words that you can say in Oxford is, "Do you want to speak George?" I can't tell you how rough it's been for our town. We lost 2 lives, 2 women drowned. One of them was found on someone's lawn the next day. We had 2 firemen that almost drowned. One was pinned under a guardrail, and fortunately they were both rescued. But we also rescued close to 80 people from cars. At the time I was in the police station, I had no inkling whatsoever it's going to be a flood until I walked out of the police station and I was up to my ankles in water. And soon I was up to my knees in water. But Route 67 looked like the Colorado River. I don't know where it came from, but I knew where it was going. And Little River is just that, a little river. It's actually a little oversized brook, but it was a raging torrent that day. And we had people that lost their houses. We had many people who were flooded out with loss of their things that were very important to them, like pictures and things of that nature. In fact, I understand one of the house that collapsed, they found the sonogram of the woman's child in Westport. If you know anything about geography, that's a little ways from Oxford. But thanks very much to the efforts of the state, Governor Lamont, Deep, the emergency management people, Department of Transportation. Our town has really made a very rapid recovery. We're in the process of putting up the last bridge that we need to reconnect the town. Our public works made a Herculean effort. Many of the guys working more than 90 days a week and 90 hours a week. And we also had a great deal of cooperation with the people in town. Oxford's a tough town, and we proved it. And, you know, thank you, but I just as soon not have to prove it again. But, you know, we've lived through disasters with a tornado before, but nothing like this. And, you know, I came up here out of my very much respect for the state and how the state backed us up, and especially our governor. And of course, the federal government was there too, with Congressman Himes and Senator Blumenthal. And, you know, everybody seemed to pitch in. And, you know, I'm just delighted at the progress we made. And, you know, next year, come down to Oxford, I'll buy you an ice cream. Thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, First Selectman. I know many of the provisions in this legislation, similar to last year, will help strengthen coordination between municipalities and COGS and state agencies, from clarifying how sea level rise is considered in hazmat and evacuation plans, requiring local climate vulnerability assessments for local plans of conservation and development with supporting information for additional zoning tools, requiring DPH and Deep and Pura to update regulations for water supply and sewage for climate change conditions. The bill will also create or establish a transfer of development rights program, which will help to incent for future development, ways to better encourage development in less hazardous areas. It will also require sharing of data created during local and regional plans, including geolocation of culverts and bridges by municipalities, and GIS information to ensure that that data is mapped and then shared with COGS and appropriate state agencies. So we think that these tools will be something that will really help us best protect communities and residents going forward. I also know that Andre Baumgartner has joined us today, Representative. So glad to have you here, and so appreciative of your leadership as Vice Chair on the Environment Committee, and would like to invite you to say a few words.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. Welcome back, Governor. You've had quite a weekend, but I just want to thank you for showcasing the best of Connecticut this weekend, certainly yesterday, showing the maturity of the state, honoring the institutions that we have here in Connecticut and certainly within our federal government. I would note that our governor was one of 4 Democratic governors to attend President Trump's inauguration. One of 2, I stand corrected. And I think that speaks volumes. I think that speaks volumes because extreme weather events, they don't discriminate against Republican or Democrat states. When the governor had to call President Biden regarding an unexpected extreme weather event in the form of flooding like never seen before in Oxford, he didn't hesitate to call President Biden. He picked up the phone and we received the relief we needed. Same holds true with when our president was in office beforehand, and he fielded many of your phone calls regarding hurricane events, extreme blizzards. The governor always makes those calls, and he does what's right for our state. So again, there's no Republican or Democrat way to address these extreme weather events. Here in my district, in southeastern Connecticut, I represent Groton, Mystic, and Stonington. And Yukon, Avery Point, CIRCA, the Climate Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, projects that my district alone will experience 20-inch sea level rise by 2050. That means when we have high tides every month, it will be a normal sight to see water above roads. This is the new normal. Our communities in Connecticut are not prepared for these extreme weather events, these new unprecedented events. And I thank the governor, his team at DEEP, at OPM, for prioritizing these issues this legislative session. I stand ready to work with our governor as a partner in the legislature to get these important measures over the finish line. And again, thank you to each and every one of you, our boards and commissioners on boards, such as planning and zoning, such as our erosion pollution control authorities, and so many other organizations within local government and state government that protect public health, fight for environmental justice, and ensure that public safety will always be first and foremost. Again, because this is the new normal, we have to prepare now. And thank you, Governor, for prioritizing climate action this session.
Another exciting part of this legislation is that it helps to leverage public funds to attract a greater amount of private investment in needed climate resilience infrastructure. And I'd like to welcome next Brian Garcia, the CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank.
Thank you, Commissioner. Brian Garcia, President and CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank. We stand by the governor to support this bill. To increase investment in our communities, to improve the resilience of those communities, to support their economic stability, sustainability, and ultimately growth. The Commissioner mentioned back in January of 2021, the Governor's Council on Climate Change releasing a report. There was a recommendation in that report, I think it was recommendation number 56. All the stakeholders here, the various climate change stakeholders may recall, that recommendation was to expand the scope of the Connecticut Green Bank beyond clean energy to include the environmental infrastructure, which includes climate adaptation and resilience. We hired, I want to introduce Lee Welton, our Director of Environmental Infrastructure for the Connecticut Green Bank. We have been expanding our programs to provide access to families and businesses to capital so that they could finance clean energy improvements. A lot of what we do is to try to mobilize private investment in our economy. The more investment we see, the more social and environmental outputs and outcomes we achieve as an organization. Just to give you an example, the Smart E-Loan, if Commissioner Perez were here, he would cheer on the credit unions, the community development financial institutions, the state chartered banks who are out there providing access to families to capital to support clean energy. Over the past 13 years, our local community banks and credit unions have provided nearly 9,000 families with over $180 million of capital to finance clean energy improvements so that they can reduce their energy costs and improve their homes. We also have a commercial property assessed clean energy policy that we administer. There have been some 400 property owners around the state. There are 139 of our 169 municipalities who have voluntarily agreed to support those property owners by putting a benefit assessment on their property that has unlocked over $350 million of private investment in clean energy in those properties. So we have restructured those programs, now making them allowable to be used to finance resilience improvements. Again, more private investment in our economy to make our communities more resilient is good for sustainability and good for economic growth. The concept of resilience improvement districts that you will see in this bill is essentially that. We need to move beyond providing access to capitals to individual property owners. That is great, but we need community scale investment. I think Commissioner Mays would say we definitely need to see that community-wide approach to supporting resilience projects. And when we see that, the insurance industry will take note. Hopefully, all of that investment that happens in those resilience projects results in a reduction of insurance premiums for all of those who are benefiting from that investment. And then just lastly, as we make an increase investment in our communities, of course, we get all of the economic development benefits that come from that investment, but we will also see public health benefits as well. Listening to Andre there, I was reminded, Andre, of Representative Santiago and Commissioner Dykes talking about the Meriden Green. You know, that was an investment in, yes, flood control, but it also provided a community asset in a recreational park that is leading to the economic growth of that community. So we need to be thinking smarter about how we enable more investment in our communities so that we can realize the resilience benefits of that while also improving our local citizens' lives and our economy. So, Governor, we are super excited to be here with you in support of this bill to unlock more private investment in our economy. Back to you.
Terrific. Next, I'd like to welcome Robert LaFrance, an old friend, and with the National Audubon Society.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Governor. Hi, folks. My name's Robert LaFrance, and I'm with the National Audubon Society's Connecticut office. I just want to jump on the back of what Brian Garcia talked about. These types of investments can create recreational and nature opportunities that can help us with our resilience problem, as well as help us deal with issues of nature. We represent the birds, so our focus is on things like salt marsh sparrow, right? This type of investment, these types of initiatives use nature or can use nature to help us deal with resilience. It's a really simple proposal, and it helps us deal with two issues. We have a biodiversity crisis. The biodiversity crisis can be helped by this. And the leadership of the commissioner, this whole of government approach is something we find fantastic. We've been working with OPM, the commissioner's staff, who I want to give a shout out to, fantastic group of people at the department who are offering up these ideas. We want to continue to work with them. EC, energy, environmental conservation, and environmental quality. They all have a role in this particular investment. So I think the fact that we have money becoming available through you, Governor, making certain those dollars are available. We have new and innovative ways to actually put forward ways to come up with municipal authorities, that those municipal authorities can actually make significant investments, but also to work through coastal resilience issues. We are part of the Hammonasset retrofit, if you will, of where we're trying to go out there is to try and help make Hammonasset a more resilient place. And we want to be able to do that through education. We want to be able to do that with nature-based solutions. We want to work with living shorelines to make that coastal area better. Much of what Audubon does in the coastal context is trying to do some of this renovation and this rehabilitation, this restoration. I thank you, Governor, I thank Commissioner, and I love the whole of government approach. Insurance, consumer protection, the green bank, health, that's the way to do it, Governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
I need my phone. Thank you again, Commissioner.
It is almost like a cabinet meeting here today, and I do think that speaks to the incredible coordination across agencies, and especially appreciate the work of OPM leadership and on helping to bring this together. But of course, all that leadership starts at the top, and so without further ado, I want to welcome you, Governor Lamont, to the podium to speak to your vision for this bill and climate resilience.
Well, thanks. Welcome to a meeting of the Resilience Cabinet. And you've heard about some of the real efforts we've made, insurance and resilience and Green Bank and Katie. And I don't think we're winning. I think we're losing. I think as I look around the country, ask LA, ask Florida, ask North Carolina, ask George down at Oxford. Climate change is real, and these extreme weather events are costing us more and more every day. George, I was down there that next day, hundreds of businesses and homes wiped out, and we're playing catch up. I used to think that resilience was all about the shoreline and rising sea levels, and there's a little creek right in the middle of, central Connecticut. I saw what happens to our farms in the Connecticut River Valley, and one day they need irrigation, and the next day they're 5 feet underwater. I was, Andre said I was down at the inauguration. They did a lot of executive orders. We were just going over all the executive orders, and I was really dismayed that one of the first executive orders the president signed was getting us out of the Paris Climate Accords. New England produces as much CO2 emissions in a year as China does in a day. And the climate accords, can we call them the Trump-Xi climate accords? Will that make them a little more appealing? Because if we can't work internationally, we're going to continue losing on this battle. And I want to make sure that the rest of the world sees that Connecticut, and more importantly, America, is taking the lead and not reneging on our responsibilities. What we can do as a state is what you've heard described here. I was shocked when I went down to the Norwich Valley after that flooding, and nobody had any flood insurance. It wasn't in a floodplain. The broker didn't really emphasize it as important. So, working with Andy and insurance, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. We're going to make sure when you're there, when you're getting that mortgage, the broker is required to tell you what the risks you have here in terms of flood insurance and what's available to you. And as you heard from Brian, I'd like to see our insurance guys do the same thing as we do with the energy bills. If you do resilience, it saves you money. What you can do in terms of energy efficiency saves you 20 to 30% on your electric bill. And what you do in terms of resilience, I'd like to see the insurance companies give our homeowners and our businesses a little incentives there, reduce the cost of flood insurance if they do, the right thing. And, Katie and Brian and Andy are going to put together with the insurance guys, what are those metrics that allow you to save some money? We got to look at this whole idea of what the floodplain is. I mean, it's just so antiquated in this day and age, and the world is changing so fast. And we've been talking with Katie about, look, if the feds aren't going to take a look at what the floodplain is, maybe we should here in the state of Connecticut and give you a little better idea. After Hurricane Sandy, I thought the floodplain was all about the shoreline communities, and then I realized it's a much bigger than that. And if we're going to keep ourselves safe, you're going to keep you safe, keep your business safe. We can't sit around just responding to these emergencies and hope that FEMA and SBA and DECD get you a little bit of emergency relief. I want to give you all the tools you need to protect yourself in these changing times. Thanks for what you guys do. You're making a little difference every day.
Thank you, Governor. Now we have time for a few questions.
Commissioner Mays, sir, could I ask you, to your knowledge, what kind of commitment is the insurance industry making in the state? Are they leading the state? Are they raising rates disproportionately?
The insurance industry is a part of the advisory council that I mentioned. We are working with them, and part of what I need to see is what kind of discounts, as the governor mentioned, that they would have to offer. At this point, just on the second part of your question, we do have a market that's vibrant. We don't have a problem such as some states have with people being unable to get insurance. But we do want to make sure that that market is as competitive as possible and that it accurately reflects the risks in the market. You know, we have to make sure that people can get insurance at the lowest possible cost that will ensure the companies will be in business whenever they need to pay a claim. That's, they're part of the solution. It's a holistic solution, and that is why the council that we have has incorporated has industry, consumers, academics, and others on it. It's not an easy, if there were easy answers, we would have gotten to them already, but we do need to know that we have to make sure that there are incentives for consumers to do the work in order to reduce the risk, that those incentives are reflected in their premiums, and we're working on that as well. Some companies already offer that, not all do, and we want to make sure that happens. And we will keep working to make sure that the rates that are charged, again, accurately reflect the risk.
Mr. Dykes, do you have the staff to handle this additional review of these coastal review plans? I mean, there's permitting is always an issue in the length of time it takes, and then of course there's people who don't like the conditions that are set upon certain developments. So do you have?
Sure. So to your latter point, this is a collaborative process, and there's no requirement for municipalities to follow the direction or the recommendations that DEEP provides, but it's a consultation. And in addition, there is a deadline or a timeline of 35 days for DEEP to be able to provide these comments. So we've never had a problem with being able to meet that timeline.
Could you explain a little bit more about what this transfer development program would entail?
So this is an innovative program, and I don't know, I'm happy to invite Joanna Wozniak-Brown from OPM if you want to say a few words, because I know you've been the lead on this, but it's really trying to take a forward look to help value the development rights that would be lost if a residential property in the coastal or in a climate vulnerable space were to no longer be able to be developed. Go ahead, Joanna. You'll do it better than I do.
I'm not sure about that, Commissioner, but thank you. Hi, I'm Joanna Wozniak-Brown. I'm the Climate and Infrastructure Policy Coordinator at OPM. A property is essentially a bundle of rights, and development rights are a part of that bundle, and you can sell off those development opportunities at the will of municipalities if they want to participate in this program. They can also perform it regionally. I often think about Mystic and Stonington and Groton for this example, where there's risk along a certain area, but they want to encourage economic development. So you can sell off the development rights. The property owner is kept whole for the value of their property, but then that a developer or the municipality could purchase those development rights and then direct extra development in places that are less risky.
I have a question for the Insurance Commissioner. Can you step up? Thank you. Cost is such a big factor for a lot of people, and insurance is already very expensive for homeowners. And I would imagine people would have flooding insurance if they thought it was a good thing, but it's not cost effective. It's not in their means. So how do you encourage people to get that kind of insurance?
Well, part of what we have, there are two things that we have to do. One is to reduce the risk. And we do that by mitigating the potential harm, and that is by making sure that the building standards are followed, the building codes are improved, that people have the opportunity to essentially do everything they can to make their homes withstand the natural disasters. We've all seen the pictures. You see the one house in California left standing after the fire. You see the one house in Florida left standing after the hurricane because they were built to the standards. We want to make sure everybody has access to those standards. Everybody will know what those standards are so they can build to those standards. That's very important. Reducing the risk is of prime importance. When it comes to being able to address the issues concerning the cost of insurance, part of what we have to do, we have to walk a balance. It's a fine line that we walk, a balancing act. We have to look at what will happen 5, 10, 15 years from now. We have to make sure that that insurance company, whoever it may be, is charging enough to be able to cover any disaster for which they may be on the hook. We've got an entire team of actuaries that are looking at that. With that said, the other side is that we are constantly pushing them to say, what can we do? How can we reduce costs? What discounts can you offer? How can you help the consumers who need it? The National Flood Insurance Program, as you know, is a federal program. It is not a Connecticut state program. It is not something that we can address in terms of individual coverage. But there are community issues that we are working on, and as Commissioner Dykes mentioned, there are ways that communities in general can reduce their costs.
So part of the goal of the legislation is to encourage homeowners to make certain improvements in their homes and get some kind of a reduction in their insurance if they take flood insurance.
You're absolutely, well, yes, we will work with the companies, which is what we are doing now and we will continue to do in the next few months. Because part of what we have to do, if we have to recognize, as the governor said, that things are changing. If you just look at the numbers, the extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and severity. The costs are incredible. And unless we want to ship those on to the taxpayers, we have to make sure that there is a system that can address this. So how do we work together to do that? That's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on incentivizing everyone, and that's from consumers all the way up, to be able to do what they need to do in order to reduce the risk and thus reduce the overall cost. Reducing the overall potential cost of a disaster will help reduce premiums.
The Commissioner compared this, says a lot of the proposals were in SB 11 last year. That legislation did not pass. Governor, have you spoken to legislators, and what do you plan to do to get this over the finish line this year?
Sure. I think that, I feel really encouraged by the conversations I know that we've had at DEEP, and I think some of our fellow agencies would say the same. That particularly with all of the weather events that impacted communities across the state last year, I just think that there's a growing sense of urgency to move some of these tools forward. It's how we can keep our community safe, and I think that that's a bipartisan goal. And so we're optimistic about the chances this year, and I think looking forward to having this early and open dialogue with legislative leaders about how we can move this ahead.
Couldn't look it up on my phone. The resiliency districts, right? I believe the bill last year allowed them to assess property in the district, or no? Am I wrong there? I'm just wondering, will these districts be empowered to, okay, you live in this property, we want to do this work, we got to pay for it, we got to back up our bonds, so you're going to have to pay X amount in addition to your property tax?
Great question. Yeah, the important part there is that the community determines it, so there is a community action that has to happen. We've got our partners here with the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, who have been working with communities around the state to understand local resilience needs and to help those communities develop plans. So you go through a planning process to understand what the risks are, what are all the projects that need to be invested in order to reduce the impacts of climate and increase our resilience. I was just talking to our colleague earlier today. Those plans need to be revenue grade plans, meaning they need to be investable. So when the community puts forward that plan and votes as a community and says, we want to do this to increase and improve our resiliency, that then a benefit assessment gets put on every one of those properties to invest and unlock the investment in those projects. That's what unlocks the private investment from bonds and other sources of capital that we're excited about. And then ultimately the insurance industry in terms of all the properties that are within that district that are being insured, they've all those assets have become more resilient. So all of those families and businesses who have made that investment should also realize the savings impact from the insurance industry for that investment.
There was nothing in there about building codes and standards, right? This bill isn't going to, this bill is not going to
Correct.
impose anything on the local government. Okay.
And with that,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you, everyone.